Camilo Restrepo. I know a lot of people were really interested in this one when they saw us announce his departure. Now, I want to talk about Cuba Gordon now. So Cuba Gordon's moved on, obviously. Tomo obviously returned, but there was a lot of questions about Josh Asude obviously coming back for his third spell.
Need a new manager.
All right, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to another Hashtag United video. It's finally time for our mid-season update. We don't do this every year. We have done this, I think, once at least before. But this season, we decided we were going to do it. There was lots of comments, lots of questions. There's loads to unpack here about the way the season started, about player departures, player incomings, why have they happened. You don't always get that intel in an Instagram post or a little bit of news at the start of a YouTube match video. So that's what this video is for. It's going to be one of the longer ones. There's a lot of questions from you guys. We appealed on various social media platforms for you to ask us directly what me and Devs, obviously the manager who's here, that's who you really want to hear from. We're going to answer them as best as we can. And then we're going to crack on with the second half of the season. I say second half. We are a little bit past halfway now. We are going to play our most ever games this season as well. That's factual now. It's going to be at least 56 games this season. Last year was our previous record of 54. So we've beaten that by 2. And it could be as many as 58 if we were to reach the final of the Velocity League Cup, which we did last year, of course. We played Chatham in the quarterfinals at the end of January. So it is a packed schedule once again. I'm going to ask Dev some questions about all that stuff. But just quickly, before we crack on with more of that, we've still got TST content to come as well. We are going to be going to North Carolina again this summer, so stay tuned for that. Building the squad, trying to win that $1 million. We really want to win it this year. Quick shout out to the women as well, who don't get the love they probably deserve at the moment, content-wise. Going very well again in the third tier of women's football. Currently in a title race with Ipswich. And in the FAWNL, that's the National League Cup that we won last year, and we beat Newcastle in the final. We are in the semi-final of that again, and we're playing Nottingham Forest at the end of the month, who are a very good side from the Northern League. And yeah, if we win that, we'll probably be favourites to retain the trophy, which is a trophy won by huge football clubs. So if we can win it twice in a row, it would be outrageous. Keep smashing it, ladies. And then there may be another game to announce, which might technically take it to as many as 59 for the season, potentially, that you'll definitely enjoy. Big YouTube matchup. Stay tuned for more info on that. Right, Devs, let's talk about Hashtag United. Straight off, actually, I'll use a question from Instagram. NUFC Rob 1990 asked, what's the atmosphere like in the changing room right now?
It's very good at the moment. Yeah, it's lively. We're in good form at the minute, and it comes with winning games. People talk about team spirit, winning games, but often winning games brings the team spirit around. It's it hasn't been bad all season, no. even when it's been bad. I don't think the atmosphere's been bad as such. But
when we first started talking about doing this video, which was probably mid-December, we had a few players leave, everyone was asking questions. The mood probably wouldn't have been as good if we'd asked you that question right then.
No, certainly it's improved. It feels like very similar to it's been in the past when things have been going well.
What is it with you in Decembers? You just love December.
I'm just full of joy around the Christmas period. You know what I mean? I'm just.
What was it like? 2019 or something? Last time we lost a game in December, the men's team.
League game, yeah. Last time we lost a league game, I think, was Hadley in the Essex Senior League.
That's mad. And it feeds into my next question, which is actually a question on YouTube comments from the local Rabbi 47. And he said, question for Devs. Obviously, the start of the season wasn't fantastic. No lies. But the recent form has been nothing short of sensational. How do you galvanise a team and truly turn the tables so well? And it's a really good question because, it wasn't the start that we wanted, that we envisioned, but I think it's fair to say that there was no panicking on my side, no panicking on your side. We always knew about the December. We knew about that December form was coming. No, but seriously, what was going through your head at the start of the season? And then how did you turn it around? Because we're obviously I think it's fair to say we're in playoff contention currently, which is an amazing thing to say considering the start.
Yeah, obviously a disappointing start. I think ultimately I have to, and you say there's no panic. It wasn't panic as such, but certainly lots of soul searching on my part because when things are not going well, ultimately it lands at my feet. It's my responsibility, and I think there's a few factors to that we need to consider, and none of these are excuses, but they are things that you don't necessarily consider when at the time when thinking about it. First one is I've made mistakes. I made mistakes over the close season in terms of took some gambles probably around, you know, some signings, and they didn't work out. And sometimes you just got to hold your hands up and say, you know, we got it wrong. And getting the timing around that is key as well, because it sometimes takes people a bit of time to settle, and so you want to give them the right amount of time without leaving it too long, so it negatively affects the ultimately my responsibility, the team, but also them as individuals. That's important, that they don't feel that they're just, you know, being cast aside or used. So there was some.
Let's just jump in there as well. I think that's something that people will never understand maybe about our club, and I have to say it's completely down to you, because it's not something that I've ever really. I agree with it as a strategy, but it's not something that I implemented, which is that we aren't as cutthroat as other clubs. There's a lot of clubs out there, and that's not saying we're better or worse, but we aren't. So many clubs out there, signed players. I mean, we've got a player who left us in the summer who's had 3 clubs, I think by the time it was September, because of the way they were treating him. And we just don't do that, do we? We've had players before that maybe haven't started the way they wanted to, and you just know at other teams they'd be gone. And I think I'm saying this is a positive thing. I'm saying I think it's a really nice thing about our club. And I think it's one of the reasons generally people always, even when they leave, say very good things about playing for us and under you, is because you are a man of your word. If you sign someone and you commit to that signing, you give it a really good chance to work out.
Try to. You know, it's really, you know, boils down to your morals, doesn't it? And how you want to operate, but you know, you don't always get it right. And there was some, you know, some that we've kind of publicised, you know, like Higgo, for example. He was taking a risk, we were taking a risk, and at the time of, you know, decided to retire and call it a day. I said it's not something that I regretted, and I still don't. I would have regretted not taking the risk probably with someone of his pedigree. But I think there are other factors as well. I think we have to consider the impact of TST and you know, the lengthening the season. Yeah. Eating into almost the pre-season as soon as you get back, that has an impact at the move to a new surroundings. The impact that, say, you know, attendances were down. Yep. So attendances, I think this year have been, you know, in person, the lowest, if not one of the lowest in the division, and that
at home games,
and that you know, that's difficult when you need the crowd to the guys that come and support us are absolutely amazing, but quite a small number, and there's times where they will feel down and quiet and lacking energy, and so there's less of them to you know, rally the troops, if you like, from the stands.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy as well, because like at the moment we're on this great run, and I've already seen an uplift in gates, and I think that's going to continue as if we keep winning. And obviously you've got something to play for at the end of the season, and then the vibe is better, the noise, the support from the crowd is better, and it does influence performances. When you're on a bad run, everything just feels low, and it's really hard to get out of it.
Absolutely. And then, you know, and obviously the new surroundings, the new pitch, and I think Averley struggled coming to grips with their new pitch, the new surface, plays differently. So all those kind of things, you know, and are taking a little bit of time to get used to. But within that, and whilst the results were really poor, we were losing games that last year we might have drawn or even nicked to win. There were a lot of late goals we conceded in tight games against teams that were going really well, and you know, up there. I can think of 3 or 4, which is too many performances in particular where we really let ourselves down. But the majority of it wasn't necessarily about performance. It was just about, you know, having faith and believing that the tide would turn for us. So there's always a lot of factors. You know, we had a couple of key players that were missing at the time, that impacted our preparation, if you like, the season, because we didn't know if they would be available and ended up not, and being out. So you're working, waiting and getting them fit. That's not an excuse. It's a squad game, but it is something that you know you have to contend with. So, but within all of that, I don't think we've ever been boring or it's lacked entertainment. And that's the thing with our side is, I think even now, if you look at goals for and against at this stage of the season, we're you see more goals in our games than I think goals per game. I think we're right up there in the division. Last year was similar. We'll do a little bit better than that, didn't we?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And just to skip forward on a few things, because you mentioned Higgo there, and there was a question. We're going to discuss specific players, particularly like those that have exited the club. Voz921 asked on YouTube what happened to Higgo. And this is slightly my fault, because what we did when Higgo left and he retired, we did a lovely post for him, about his amazing career on social media. We didn't really implement that in the YouTube videos. And a lot of you guys who watch the YouTube and don't necessarily see the social post, for many weeks after that, were commenting, where's Higgo? So just to categorically say this, Higgo did retire after, it must have been 5 or 6 weeks of the season, had another injury sort of setback, and decided to pack it in. And on the Higgo factor as well, I obviously echo everything you just said. It was a calculated risk. But also, when we signed him, it was very much under the impression that we were going to have a Luke May Parrott, and it was going to be more of a, because we always knew Higgo was going to struggle with minutes. And it was going to be a bit of a double act and either playing together or one coming in for the other. And actually what happened is we started the season without Higgo because he was suspended at the start. So we had no recognised striker because Luke had the hernia operation. Misha was deputising up there. Toby was doing a job. So probably Higgo, I'm not saying it would have worked in another universe, but we were more dependent on him than we wanted to be at times.
Yeah.
And therefore it threw him straight into the furnace. So who knows in a parallel universe what might have happened there. But there was a strategy there that, in the Higgo signing, being part of an attacking offering, that ultimately the other parts weren't available. So that there is that there. So that's the Higgo section covered. But we'll crack on with some more of the questions because there's loads to get through.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about individual player exits later. But right now, just to have that second question on the start of the season, combined to now, how it is, we have turned a corner. What did you see as the turning point? Was it players coming back from injury? Was it some new additions? Was it just, it was always going to happen, you just had to get the minutes in the tank for the players?
It gets to the point where you start to question yourself and the players, and you question the players, and you make them kind of aware that, things need to change. We had to move, some people on and make some squad changes, and I think that has an impact either way. And, that's not that the immediate improvement is all down to the new signings or all down to the old sayings, but it kind of, it sets a bit of a shock in the changing room, and some went and were unfortunate to go, and I know we'll cover that in a minute. And some stage you could argue were fortunate to stay, and those harsh conversations were had with people about having to step up. But
that's such a big part of your job, isn't it? Is getting those decisions right. Who's the player to move on? Who's the player to bring in? Who's the player to give a little bit more time? Like you never get to quantify it ever. You never know if it was completely
and you
right.
never know. On one week it's the worst decision in the world, and the next week it's brilliant. And then there's things like there's decisions that have been made in season that take a little bit of time to come to fruition, if you like. For example, like the idea of moving Matty into midfield.
Yes.
That's something that we've seen a little bit of and like to see more of, but as a non-specialist midfielder, knew it would take time, and there were games where he took to it like a duck to water, and he was really effective, and then there are other games where he looked completely lost. But that's part of understanding him getting to grips with the transition of the position, and you either give up on that and never know, or if you see something and believe in it, you stick at it and in the hope that it comes good. And I my personal opinion is of late is been nothing short of exceptional in that position.
And what a goal! If you haven't seen it against Chatham, what a goal that was.
And that bad start, which was a bad start and a slow start, and that's something we need to look at and address for moving forward for next season, is something that we're thinking about. But equally, when we look at the time we're speaking now, we're ahead of where we were at the same time last year in terms of goals scored, in terms of points accumulated. I think we've conceded one more than we had conceded last year, but at this time last year we went on a run, I think, of 6 games without. I think we might have picked up a point in 6 games. So you don't know what's going to happen, but
this is the part of the season that really matters now, isn't it? It's about that end to the season, that momentum, particularly if you're targeting like a potential playoff spot. if you were to design a way to do it, it's better to do it the way we potentially could do it, with a slow start, creep up on people, end the season on a high, than it is to have a great start and drop off of a title race, fall into the playoffs, and maybe not have that momentum.
Momentum's everything, and it works both ways, doesn't it? You know, you downward momentum can happen as well, often more quickly than upwards. So, so if you're looking at comparing like for like, season on season, we're actually making good progress. And some of the criticism we've had is about not taking chances.
Yes.
Only, I think, in terms of teams played the same games as us, only Dover have scored more goals in the league than us.
Who we play next? I'm not sure when you guys are going to see this. They're top of the league. We play them next. It might be after that game. But yeah, that will be a slobber knocker for sure, hopefully. Anyway, the last one was, a really good example of that. I think we played them at their place. We lost 4-1, and I believe XG of the game, because we get that data now and those reports, was 4-1 to us.
Something ridiculous.
Something like that. So basically, I'm not saying we should have won the game, but statistically, we created better chances than them. They just scored these worldy long ranges, which we were considering a lot of at the start of the season, but I think we have seemed to cut that out, which is great. Just want to caveat everything we've just said as well with, just like we didn't panic and didn't get too low when we weren't going great, we also don't get too high now and think, there's nothing done. Like we're not in the playoffs. We've got a real hard job to get in there, because there's some really good teams ahead of us. So the smart money would probably be against us right now.
And we'd be dependent on other teams.
Yes, we will be.
Really slowing up.
We left ourselves a lot to do.
Yeah, possibly too much.
Yeah, possibly too much. But the point is that we turned what was a bad start around. We felt we would. So let's just see what happens and put ourselves in the best position. Okay, let's crack on. So there's a lot of questions about transfers. And now I know often we cover this more generic stuff in the start of the season update, but equally it's something that happens in season, isn't it? So I thought we'd cover it here. So Max Morris 4674 asked, do we get many 7-day approaches for teams? And obviously, if you don't know, essentially there's two kind of ways you could transfer in a non-league. There's a non-contracted player, which a 7-day approach would be used in that sense, means that a club contacts a club, says they would like to talk to that player, and then they are not allowed to talk to that player for 7 days. The club that the player currently plays for then have 7 days to talk to that player, find out if they want to move on, test the water a little bit, and then after 7 days, the other team can contact them. Sometimes clubs waive that and say talk to them straight away. If a club has a contracted player, then the 7-day approach is sort of null and void, and it's more a case of the two clubs negotiating a deal. So, we do get 7-day approaches just like every club, don't we?
Yeah, we've got one in at the moment.
Have we? I didn't know about that. Tell me later.
Yeah, we get them in, fairly regularly. It's just part and parcel. Players are free to move on. Sometimes they take that decision to do that for whatever reason. It might be around playing time. It might be financial. It might be opportunity. And often, we've been fortunate often that they've chosen to stay because they enjoy being where they are. And
likewise, we put them in as well, as any club does. And sometimes we have success, sometimes we don't. I think we've got a fairly good track record at high-profile signings when we've gone for them to really target a specific player. But obviously, we're a very specific kind of club, and we're not necessarily to everyone's tastes, as you probably know by now.
And we have a lot of players say no to us.
Yeah, of course. So there's 3 questions here I'm going to sort of merge together, and it's about recruitment from our side. So Emil 5564, question for you and Devs: how do you go about recruiting transfers? What are you looking for? El Merriweather said, are you getting any more players in this season? There is no transfer window, it's worth saying, by the way. There is an end date where you can't register players beyond to stop people signing players like just for a playoff semi-final or whatever. But generally, it's a bit of a wild west. And then finally, Guillermo says, can you shed some light on how the scouting system works between Devs and Joe? How do you find gems like Mert Apat, who obviously joined us, and a resurgent Asude midway through the season? So how do we do it? Are we good at it, in your opinion?
Well, I hope so. I'd like to, because I do most of it. So it comes about in so many different ways. It can be just our contacts that we've built over the years. Obviously, we look to see who's doing well, and we've got a very, very small team of people that we'll send out to watch games. Sometimes it's about players we know about, and other times, and in Mert's case, it's you get approached by a player, or in his case, in Mert's case, it was his brother who was kind of representing him, basically saying, are you looking for a centre half? And at the time, we were light in that area, and he came in to train with no promises. We saw something in him, and opportunity arose for him that is taken.
Yeah,
an opportunity that may not have happened in our squad being full at the time. So there's luck. There's absolutely luck involved with it. Obviously, you look at the players' pedigree. You see to what level they've played at, their age. You look at their kind of their ceiling in terms of potential. So, it's lots of things. So try and get to watch the players. I try and certainly players that we don't know. I will go and watch.
Yeah.
And then I will ask somebody else to go and watch.
And sometimes you watch them multiple times.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And technology is coming into our level a little bit more this year. So we're obviously in the 7th tier of the men's pyramid. But technology is coming in. So, for example, we've been one of the most scoutable teams in our league for a long time. Everyone can watch our highlights. We produce decent videos. It's not always been the case for our opponents, but now as a league rule, for example, at our level, we all have to submit at least what's called VO footage, which is like a tracking camera, or better than that, to a sort of league portal, which not only gives you access to games, but also there's layers on top of that, scouting platforms, for example, that a lot of the teams, including us in the league, are now signed up for, that does layer a level of interpretation on top of that data. And we've got access to data, quite frankly, this year that we're just getting to grips with, aren't we? That blows anything else we've had out the water. Serious levels of interpretation. It's not just about having the information; it's about analysing it and interpreting it the right way to make good decisions, to reinforce maybe thoughts you already have. Sometimes to disprove things that you might need validation on, and say, actually, no, there's some other stuff happening here in the underlying data. So that's exciting to see how we can use that. But obviously, everything comes at a cost, and it can rack up quite. Even at the 7th tier, you'd be surprised at what teams can spend in that department.
And I think, all the data that we get and all the additional information we get is brilliant. But I still, I believe that the most important tool you've got when it comes to recruiting is your eyes.
The eye test, the old eye test. Question from Timlin22. I'm going to guess he's American because of the word he uses in a minute. Question for the season update video: are we planning to sign a backup goaltender at all? Giddens has been on form, but we're looking at a reserve team call up if he gets injured or is away. And I'm sure our reserve keepers can perform well in this league, but I think we'll be more confident in a bona fide backup. So we don't generally carry a keeper on the bench.
It's difficult. No, it's difficult to keep. A non-contracted goalkeeper. The goalkeepers are a premium anyway. There's always clubs looking for goalkeepers. That's where they can go and get regular football. It's very rare you'll get someone that's capable and prepared to just sit and be number two. So we'll do what most clubs do in the same situation: is keep our fingers crossed that Gids stays healthy. But should anything happen, then we would then look to recruit someone in an emergency basis, or potentially go down the loan route like we've obviously done before as well. So it works differently, doesn't it? People, majority of our viewers will be viewing with the same kind of way that they would view, say, that the Premier League or a top level league. It works very differently.
That's why you do see fairly regularly in non-league football, outfield player have to go in goal in an emergency situation. Shout out to Gids, by the way, and this is the sort of struggle you have as a non-league goalkeeper. The Whitehawk game away right before Christmas, horrible conditions. He had been terribly ill that week, and we didn't really have an option yet to play. And should have kept a clean sheet, really. The only goal they scored was a penalty, and he's actually solid that day, and I know he was struggling. So these are the little sort of anecdotal things that happen at the club that you guys, for good reason, just don't get insight into. And I think that's a really important thing for you guys to remember sometimes. I think a lot of you do get this, but some of you don't, which is like, of course you've got opinions, and we like your opinions, and the club's built on them in many ways, but sometimes you're arguing against people that have just so much more information than you. And, it's very hard to win that battle. So just remember that maybe when you think something doesn't look right, there could always be more going on than you think. And then, Stop Cop City asked on X, is there any more interesting players at a certain time of the season, or do things kind of play out differently? I think you sort of explained that. It's just reacting to things that may or may not happen. And there's always a chance we could still bring players in this year, going back to the earlier question.
And that'd be dependent on need. an opportunity. If the right player comes up, or we find ourselves, we can lose. We can bring players in, but we think we lose players, which will force the need to bring players in. So
can't always plan for that.
Just got to kind of be ready.
I'm going to sort of skim through some questions now, just quickly to address it, but I'm aware of the length of this video. But there's a lot of questions about contracts. So obviously we've talked about contracts in the past. We've had players on contracts. We have players on contracts now in the men's team and the women's team. But there was questions like from Ty, which players are on contract now? Previously, there was transparency around who was and who wasn't, but it feels like there's been no new info for some time. Another question from Timely Hinfalusi. What players are on contracts and what goes into selecting who gets a contract? And has the club rejected any offers for players and why? And then finally, R. Torres says, I remember you posted a deal about Harry Haysom, getting a contract with hashtag. Is there anyone else signed on a multi-year deal? So just quickly, like we made a decision not to post about those contracts at the start of the year. And I think that's a really good example of many decisions we make. Like I've seen Devs getting some stick recently, actually, for like team talks and stuff, right? Devs has managed, I don't know what it is now, nearly 300 games for this football club, right? It's 300 filmed team talks, yeah? First of all, he doesn't need to be thinking about whether it's like an entertaining one for our audience when he's doing a team talk. He needs to think about the football team. Second of all, there is stuff there we don't show, guys. Obviously, think about it. We're putting the video up before we play our next game. There's so much tactical stuff that Devs and Joe and whoever do say in that room that unfortunately we can't bring you in real time because it would be just absolutely detrimental to our football season, which you guys don't want to see. So with that logic in place, think about the contract situation. There's reasons why we may or may not make that public knowledge. But there are players. Dev, do you want to explain why we might contract a certain player? What's the profile of a hashtag contracted player?
I think the things we look at are age, again, and potential. Often it'll be around the two main factors are we, if we feel like being here at our club is the best thing for them kind of moving forward, unless they get a significant opportunity. So a lot of it's to prevent sideways moves. If you like, clubs with bigger resources in the same league coming in. And
it has happened, isn't it? Players that have been contracted, clubs in our league come in for them, and we can say, look, they put a 7-dayer in, doesn't matter, he's on contract.
And we have to accept, within that, and we talk, and there's always be this kind of view of us because of YouTube views and etc. that our resources are. Yeah. I think they get, the expectation of our resources is somewhat inflated. Yeah. So there are clubs that are in our league and with a lot more resources than us.
Blow us out the water.
More established, if you like, bigger fan bases in terms of gate receipts and crowds. So some huge non-league football clubs in our league.
And it's a testament to some of our players who haven't been on contract that have turned down moves to set some clubs for big money and things in the past because they buy into our projects and they want to be part of it. And so
we've equally had players that have said no to a contract because they're quite happy and don't feel the need to have one.
Very much so. We've got a player this year who's on a contract last year, isn't on a contract this year, but is still with us. So we make those decisions based on can they grow with the club? Have they got potential to go higher? From our side, when we contract a player, they're somewhat secured through injury, aren't they? So there's an incentive to them. There's a risk to our club. But we believe that there's a player that could go on, could be a really big part of our project. So we want to keep them around. So it doesn't always happen. Like sometimes, like you said, they turn it down and we don't have that relationship. But when we can, we try and make them a big part of the club because they've committed to us, obviously. Let's crack on. Talk about injuries. Before we get into player departures, talk about injuries, because there has been a lot this year. I know every club has them. Last year, it felt like they were all condensed in January. This year, it's kind of been non-stop. We've always had at least 2-3 starting players out, I think, in different positions. Joe Christou is someone that you guys barely know, quite frankly, because we signed him about a month into the season, and the few games he played was absolutely mustard, but he's back-to-back quad injuries. Are we expecting him back anytime soon?
Yeah, so Joe's back in training, and by the time this video goes out, he would have got some minutes in the reserves. Okay. And obviously, if he comes through that, then we'll be looking to, integrate him back in.
Just don't want to rush that one.
This is the thing, and this is the other thing that comes with the bad form from early in the season, is that Joe, where he hadn't been playing a lot at his previous club, and he come in and the character that he is as well, we found ourselves dependent on him. He then picks up the niggle, tries to play through it because to help the team, and we end up losing him for longer. So we need to be careful with him. Manage him back carefully.
It helps now when your form's an upturn in form. You can afford to be a bit more patient with these things. So that was a question from Carl Carter. Arrows YouTube asks, what happened to the striker Alfie Q? I swear one day he just disappeared. We have updated you guys on that indifferently. You might have missed it. So he's actually been in a couple pre-match sequences recently. He's been training, warming up with the boys. He had a knee operation, not his first knee operation. And he's training again now, I think.
And will be featuring in the next reserve game as well.
You've got to watch that.
Alfie's comeback's going to take a bit longer.
Is that a home game, that reserve game?
It is, yeah.
So it's going to be streamed for members.
But it would have gone out by the time this is...
Yeah, but still, other games are streamed for members. This is a chance for you guys to sign up and become members because you get to see these games. You want to be a proper fan of hashtag. You want to, when you next make a comment on a YouTube video, don't you want to have it the most informed comment possible? You can watch 90 minutes of reserve matches, which often feature players returning from injury to give you that insight. £5 a month. Sometimes you get like 10 games. Don't forget the women's games as well. Going back to an earlier question, we actually have more women's players contracted this year than we do men's players, which shows you a bit of our commitment to the women's game, which I'm really proud of. But yeah, become a member. Links in the description. But you think Alfie will take a bit longer?
Alfie is obviously a more significant injury. He's been out a long time. He's had surgery.
So there's another one that if that hadn't happened, the bad timing of that, which happened obviously last season, when Luke was out, it would have been lovely for him just to sit in there and play up front for us, but we just had them all out at the same time.
Yeah. So, and actually, if you are a member, you'll probably see a little bit more of Alfie in the reserves as we build him up towards, that level of competitiveness.
Question about Haysom. Haysom has featured in quite a few games since returning from injury off the bench. This is a question from Kevin Hartenow 22, asking when Haysom will be back. He's available.
And he would have started our last game that was postponed because of weather. So,
because Mert is obviously serving a 3-match suspension. Shout out to Nathan Smith, who's just been deputising in at left centre-back. Shout out to Josh Rosoke, by the way. It's sort of linked to some of the questions we've got here is, Josh was very patient at the start of the season, wasn't getting a lot of game time. I was concerned he might move on at one point. Players often do. They get impatient. He waited, took his chance. What a player he's been. He was November Player of the Month. And, with the Haysom injury, the fact that we could have Nathan and Josh, it's really interesting, actually, because at the start of the year, you looked at left back, you had Nathan and Josh. You looked at right back, you had Matty and Jermaine. But actually, over that really good December spell, we had all 4 of them playing. The 2 left backs and the 2 right backs in, because Nathan was playing centre back and Matty was playing centre mid. And it just shows you the versatility of some players, but also, the patience.
Well, Josh has featured in midfield as well, where he was excellent. I think it was always for Josh, it was trying to find the right time, wanting him in the side, trying to find the right time. Obviously, in his natural position, his left back, Nathan was doing well. So it was difficult to argue for Josh to come in ahead of Nathan. But I mean, I'd argue Nathan's performances at centre half have probably possibly been better than his performances at left back. So.
Well, I think you get the same sort of endeavour you get from him at left back when he plays centre back, which we needed at that time for sure with Haysom out. But then you have this whole different left back situation with Josh, a very different player to Nathan. So I love them both. I couldn't say enough good things about both of them. Really important part of the turnaround of our season is Nathan's fitting in at centre back. It's Josh, everyone. Tomo obviously returned like Josh Asude for his 3rd spell at the club. We saw him play, I think, just 2 games, and then he got an injury, and then he went to Australia, which we knew he was going to do before we signed him. Is he back now? Is he available?
Well, he is. He's available. It's interesting because the conversation I had with him about coming back, and he had said, "Well, I'm going to Australia," and it was putting him off. I think making the move to ask to come back, and I said, "The situation we're in, December's a long way off. We need you now." And
if he hadn't got injured, he probably would have played 7 or 8 games.
And actually, I think his first game back was when
Chichester.
Was obviously a good result, and
massive.
Things started to turn, didn't they?
They did. And while we're on that, because we could talk about Josh Asude again later, but Tomo and Josh obviously both left. Josh left a while ago, but came back this year. First players ever to have 3 spells at the club. We know a bit more about the Josh situation, but obviously Tomo was with us last season, left in the summer to Brentwood in the league below. We actually were able to get him back, a couple of months later. Can we shed any light on that? Because I know some people watching will be like, what happened there? Anyone in non-league understands this stuff. We'll explain it, obviously. But I think to the untrained eye, it maybe looks like what's going on. Like, why is the player leaving and coming back?
Yeah, I didn't want Tomo to go. And it was clear with
None
him,
of us
but,
did.
But he was, I think he felt, I don't know if he, I think he maybe felt that he wasn't going to play as much. And that was for anything other than, we had made signings that needed to be made anyway.
Yeah.
He had what he considered was a really good offer to go to Brentford, who are, I know league below, but having a fantastic season and was showing ambition in that league, in terms of promotion. And it didn't work out for him. And I think it's one of those where some players fit certain clubs.
Yes.
And Tomo feels like, a player that fits our club.
Me and you have known that for a long time, but hopefully now Tomo knows that, because if he leaves again, I don't think we can have him coming back in again. But listen, well, mate, I actually never say never.
Tomo's one of those that wants to play every game.
Yeah, of course.
But his body doesn't quite allow him to play every game. I know that. Yeah. He knows that. But when I make decisions around that, it's kind of difficult for him to swallow.
But also, obviously, we signed a centre back in the summer, but equally Greg Halford left, so there was an opening.
No, exactly.
You know what I mean? And Tomo had a really strong finish to pre-season as well, and we were literally. I was literally begging him not to go, to be honest. And that's not me mugging off Tomo. He's got to do what he's got to do. And listen, even when he left, he was kind of saying he thinks it might not be the right decision, but you got to do what you got to do. The point is, he's back, and we love him. Can we do an update on PK as well? Because obviously PK's had this horrible injury that's gone on for most of 2024, turned the corner, got him back playing again, had a nice little cameo against Lewis, had one more cameo, but then he hasn't played the last few games. What's happened there?
Well, he had work commitment, it ruled him out, which obviously was frustrating, but that's the nature of his work. So he's back. But what we've got to get to with PK now is to the point of the danger with PK is you're desperate to have him involved because of everything he brings in terms of his, his personality and his character. He's good for the changing room. He's good to have about. But what's not going to be any good is only being able to give him 10, 15 minutes here and there. We need to get to a point where we know, how much is in his tank, if you like, in terms of his fitness level. So he's another one that will feature for the reserves.
I can't wait to watch this reserves games.
In the next, up and coming games, just to see where we're at, because we need to get to a point with PK where, he's able to start. He's been a long time out, and PK enjoys life. So
he does. And when you're injured, you're not playing, you're not burning calories. Those things catch up on you. But just the names we're talking about here, some of the players we've been missing this season. You think about our squad and how, and listen, we've done really well without them. But Alfie Q up front, PK in the middle, Joe Christou, that's a centre mid partnership potentially right there out. Luke May Parrott missed the first third of the season. We've lost Haysom. Most seasons we've lost Haysom for around a month, or more or less. It tends to happen at some point. Even having said that, he's still played the second most games in club history. So we're always contending with something. Okay, before we cover some of the exits, I know you guys want more information on that, and we're going to give it to you. One other injury is Pedro. So if you watch closely, you'd know he broke his collarbone against Grays. And that's just a nasty injury. It's more or less a season ender, really, wasn't it, for him?
Yeah. I mean, he was hoping to return to light training, after his last appointment, which was a few days ago, but it's still not fully healed. So he's just it's the waiting game with Pedro, really. Because
we might see him this season.
We may do.
Okay.
But obviously that would be, he'll have to get his general fitness up as well. So yeah.
Maybe reserves.
It'd be a bonus for his team.
Reserve team, I'll tell you what. So that we'll keep an eye on that one. Right, let's talk about some of these exits then. We've covered Higgo. Darren Foxley. So Darren Foxley is a question from AB2AAB or AB2AAB, who's he said, "Where's Foxley?" Basically. So I think we did cover this in a video very briefly, but it was one of the ones you probably alluded to in the summer. We signed him. Very, very lot of achievements in his career. Won this league before. Played a decent amount of football in the sort of first few months of the team, and ultimately was released.
Yeah, a difficult one. Darren, brilliant character, brilliant lad, fantastic around the dressing room, really likeable. Just didn't really happen for him, and sometimes that happens, and you can't just. had to have a conversation with Darren to say, really, I'm not sure where the boys that have come in are doing well, and the form, I'm not sure where or when you're going to get your opportunity back, and then you have to make decisions as well, because if you carry in too many players, I've got a budget to work within, so sometimes have to make those decisions to, if you want to bring someone in, and someone has to go, and you often make that decision based on who's less likely to feature. But there's no questioning Darren's pedigree and what he's done in the past, and his ability, and as I said at time, so some people it just fits and it works, and for others, it doesn't quite, and that doesn't mean that they won't go somewhere else and be absolutely brilliant, and it works.
There's so many sliding doors moments in football, isn't there? Like, we as a team started the season poorly. If that was different and he was at the heart of us, having some big wins at the start of the season, his whole journey at our club could have been different. Yeah. That's just the reality of the beast, unfortunately.
And we have to accept that we are, the way we play and the way we do things won't suit everyone.
Yeah. And that's been a really interesting learning curve for me, sort of as a spectator of us this year. This is our second season at the level. We've never spent more than 2 seasons at any level. That may change this time, but generally, we've obviously always been on the up. And as a result, we've had certain objectives that have often been around promotion and whatever. And when that isn't the big objective for you, you kind of just have to do it however you can do it. This season, and bear in mind, more than 5 years ago when we joined non-league, like 7 years ago now, my aim was always to get to this level. I never had eyes bigger than this level at the time. I still don't really. Like, we can talk about that, and we will do later on in the video. But what it meant was we never had a chance to level out until we got to this level. And you could argue that is what we're doing now. And when you start to level out and you start to find your level, you can then look at your club a little bit more. And it was our bad start to the season that actually allowed me to look at our performances, and not necessarily the quality of them, but why there wasn't it working, or what did it look like on YouTube highlights versus in real life, and all these different things, and work out what are we as a club. Because you do have to have an identity. You have to have, I believe you do, because if you have an identity, it's like, if I know I don't eat really sugary chocolate bars, what does that mean? It means when I go to the petrol station and there's 100 chocolate bars to choose from, well, 90 of them are out the way already, and I can just focus on the 10 that I allow myself to eat. Now, I might be restricting myself from some lovely tastes, but it makes my decision-making a lot easier. And I think that logic can be applied in a lot of different walks of life, including football. If you want to play a certain way, you can then spend more time getting data and looking at players that want to fit that system or whatever it is, rather than having this broad brushstroke approach where you can just sign anyone at any time. A lot of football clubs do that. They just sign all these players and they don't really think about how they're going to play together, and they end up with 4 players in the same position, and they don't frankly care because they know they'll just release 2 of them at some point. That's not really our approach, as we've discussed. So it was a really interesting exercise the first few months, and I think it did lead to us signing certain players, and it did lead to us sort of refinding our mojo a little bit, if you like. So I actually really enjoyed it. Do I want to start the season like that every year? Definitely not. But I do think it was a really good sort of soul-searching little journey for us as a club that I feel much more assured about how we can approach things going forward. Another player that left...
I didn't enjoy it, let's be clear.
If you didn't enjoy it, no. I say enjoy it. It was like a masochistic enjoyment. I actually didn't want it to happen, but I took it... I think that's a really good lesson in life, people. What other people look at as failures or as bad things, if you can have the mentality where you go, actually, that was quite good because I took this from that, then that's a really good strength. Now, if you keep making the same mistakes over and over again, you can't keep taking learnings from them. So you just got to learn from them when it's new information and not make the same mistake again. I think that's what we did this season. Camilo Restrepo. I know a lot of people were really interested in this one when they saw us announce his departure. Kieran Gibson is one of the people that's asked about this, but lots of people did. How come Camilo left the club, he says? Was it his decision or did Devs decide to let him go? It's a shame because he seemed to perform every time he played but didn't play that often. I see obviously his opinion there from Kieran. We did make... you have to really be careful with how you word certain things when you do an announcement, mainly because you're looking out for the player. Also, you don't want to stitch anyone up, but you can usually read in between the lines a lot of these comments and the captions we use. So Camilo was released, and so that means it was our decision. Can you shed any light on that?
I think the thing with Camilo for me was I felt that there's a point with Camilo where the penny, I was hoping it'd be with us, where the penny will drop and he could take off because his ability, everything, his size, he's built. He's like a footballer, and he has real standout moments. And I think that's where highlights packages can be quite deceiving, because the good will always go in. The bad doesn't necessarily always make it, and particularly if you're an attacking player or a flair player, your good is going to stand out as really good.
And the reverse is true for defenders.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think for Camilo, I think we were kind of searching for a consistency from him, that it got to the point where I had to make changes. Something that had to happen. And Camilo, it was unfortunate for him that he was kind of one that I felt, well, if I'm not going to be playing him, there will be plenty of people that will play him where he can go and play. And he would only stagnate, staying and not playing.
Yeah.
He'd been with us long enough for it to be a decision, well, if you're going to be a regular starter or not, for me, he should have been a regular starter by the stage we got to.
Yeah.
And he may feel he should have been, and others may feel he should have been.
Yeah.
But ultimately, whilst I'm the manager and I have to make the decisions, ultimately it sits with me. And if my decision was that he probably wasn't going to be a regular starter, and it felt it was best for both parties if we kind of went our separate ways.
Yeah, and you talk about penny dropping and stuff like this. Sometimes for a player, being moved on is the thing that makes it happen for them at the next club. It's that I'm going to prove them wrong, get that hunger, and that could be the case for Camilo. Would not surprise me at all to see him playing a higher level one day. I think, like you say, he's got all the attributes. Really like him, and it might not be the last time you see him in a hashtag shirt. I'll let you guys figure out what that might mean, but we're still in contact. And I think you can only look back on these decisions, whether you like Camilo and you think you should have gone or not. Dev's had to make a difficult decision, and this is no reflection on Camilo's ability whatsoever. But as a result of that, and other things, additions, etc., our results started to improve. So from a managerial perspective, I think all you can do is look at the result of a decision rather than whether you agree with it itself. And that's just the nature of football, unfortunately. Like you said earlier, I think you're probably alluding slightly to Camilo with this when you said, some were unlucky to go and others were unlucky to stay. And that was the decision you made. And if you decided to get rid of someone else, that would have come with some criticism as well. There's no one... Got a lot of fan favourites. What interests me, and I really want to get onto this in detail, this next player we're going to talk about, is it's really not my place to tell you guys what to think. It's not my place to tell you how to feel about this club. I love how much you love this club. We only exist because of how much you love this club. People often tell me that we exist because of me. We don't. We exist because of you. Because I could have made this football team at any point. If you guys hadn't watched, it wouldn't still be going. You're the reason we exist. So I'll always be very careful to protect your right to have that opinion. But I do think I would love to see a little bit more measured thought process going into some of these comments that are made on YouTube before they're made. And this goes both ways. This goes on criticism for some players, and it goes on the sort of infatuation we have with some players when they haven't actually done anything that's sensational. We've got players who've won promotions and titles and huge things at our club that never really get thought of anymore. And I certainly think of them, and we like to look after those players. And other players will come in and do a few little bits, and suddenly they're in the best player we've ever had. And it's like, I think it's got to be harder to get criticism at this club, and it's got to be harder to get praise.
There's two kind of phrases that kind of amuse me, if you like. And one is that when a player should never play, and then there's players that should play, has to play every game. That's
neither.
How does that add up?
No, exactly. I think this season's been a really interesting one for that, because I want to talk about Cuba Gordon now. So Cuba Gordon's moved on, obviously. Now, this actually wasn't our decision, which may or may not surprise some of you. I know some of you have very strong opinions on this player, and what I definitely don't want to do is continue any of this Cuba rhetoric, which unfortunately has continued in the comments since he's left the club. And look, did Cuba, just to caveat everything I'm about to say, did Cuba play to the level he might have liked for every single game we had him? Probably not. Did he also have some really good games? Yes, he did have some really good games that I think went under the carpet from outside perspective. But I personally, and I don't know, you might know more about this than I do, Devs, but I think the reception he got from our YouTube audience played a big part in him leaving this football club.
Yeah, it did.
It did. And that's a real shame, isn't it? We don't really want to ever see that.
And they were, I think we need to remember that our players are part-time, have jobs elsewhere. You can't level this, that you can say what you like about people because they're earning. And I don't agree that you can say what you like about someone just because they're earning a lot of money.
They're human beings.
But these guys aren't even in that position where they go home and they look at their bank account and it kind of makes it worth sticking at. So there are a few factors I think need to consider with Cuba. One, you say sometimes with players they're not as good as we think they've been, and others are not as bad as we think they've been.
Yeah.
And with Cuba, is certainly the latter. He had some good performances to the point that the players valued him.
Yeah.
His teammates in the changing room. He was a popular person. We lost Haysom to injury. Obviously, Tomo Cuba played for an injury to the point where he kind of hid an injury. I think because he didn't want to. Or he wasn't as honest about it. He tried to play through it and didn't quite realise just how serious it was because he was masking the severity of the injury. And I think a lot of that because he didn't want to be seen to be criticised or letting us down,
which in turn affects his ability to play,
or bailing out, but it would have affected his ability to play. And obviously he spent a little while out injured, and just as he was about to come back, the criticism started again, and actually he got criticism when he was out. He was getting, the blame for things when he wasn't even on the pitch, or was the reason we were winning games because he wasn't on the pitch.
And we talked about a game earlier when there's been a lot of games this season against high-level clubs that we've outperformed them in many metrics, whether it's possession, XG, shots, whatever. Goals are the ones that matter. We all know that. But what's interesting to me, and I think it's partly due to our nature as a highlights sort of platform, is that when we win a game, when we lose a game, say 4-1, that we should objectively have won 4-1, the criticism always seems to go on the defenders.
Yeah.
But actually,
and the manager.
No, if you've shut them out to that, they've only had one proper goal scoring opportunity and we should have scored 4. And this is not me trying to get anyone else criticised, but objectively, the criticism should be on the attacking players in that instance.
And there is sometimes, and the criticism goes there. But I do think in Cuba's case, and I think it's a new player kind of syndrome, and what we don't want to be doing is scaring our new players off.
Definitely not,
because it does take time. Some people are slow burners. Some people hit the ground running, and I've always kind of take a bit of a view. You don't judge people, even if they start really well, they can tail off. That's how it. So almost you've got to allow a settling in period either way. And we see it at the top level. We see players that get written off by their fan base in the first 6 months of their club
Gareth
career.
Bale at Spurs. Remember Gareth Bale? They couldn't win a game with him in the side. Ends up being probably the best UK player of all time.
Over him, didn't he? Exactly. So everywhere I get that kind of criticism.
Well, I think your point at the start is really good. I want to hammer it home when we're talking about these top level. So yes, we are a very followed club, and I want you guys to have opinions. I want you to listen. If you're going to hold anyone to account, hold me to account, because this is my job to run this football club. Yes, I have other jobs as well, but these guys have other jobs. When you criticise a player at Man United or Arsenal, that player is on a high contract, lots of money for multiple years, and they are committed to that club. That club is committed to them. And therefore, I'm not saying they deserve the criticism they get, but there's certainly an idea where a fan of a top-level club can really be upset with a player that's not performing because they are taking resources out of that club. Anyone that takes resources from us is our decision. It's our decision to give them that resource. It's our decision to commit to them over a period of time or not. They don't have that safety net. If they don't like it here, most of them, not uncontracted, can just leave whenever they want. And we need to be really careful not to shoot ourselves in the foot here, not only to make our team just objectively worse week on week if there's certain players in there that are not enjoying their football with us because of the criticism they're getting, but also, like Dev said, to actually never get to develop someone into what they could be for our club. We have a strategy, a lot of it is around young players and being a platform for them to either kick on, or play with us for a long time. There's certain players that might never get to that point of maturation and quality if we just judge them on their first few games. So this isn't me asking you not to have opinions. This isn't me asking you not to criticise. It's me asking you to be very constructive in your criticism and just think, if you were playing, how would you feel if it was written about you? That's all I want you to do. And I know the vast majority of you don't even comment. Or you might comment, but you might only comment positive things or whatever. I'm talking to a minority here.
What I would also add is our fans that go to games, our regulars at games, were devastated when he left.
They loved him. Yeah, yeah.
And I come under some criticism, if you like, from some, because they thought it was my decision. And I had to explain that it wasn't, because they absolutely loved him. So it's interesting that context, context, perception.
I know you can't all come to games. I know you can't all watch, become members either and watch the 90 minutes of things and all that stuff. I respect that all. So I'd just say, rather than me trying to turn you all into match coming fans, because some of you live in other countries, I'm just asking you to be a little bit more measured, just as passionate, love the club, support the club, but understand how your comment could negatively affect what we're all trying to achieve here. So Cuba ultimately decided to leave, ultimately, is what we're getting at. Okay, we've had a lot of time here, so I'm going to skim through some stuff here, but there was a lot of questions about young players, about the reserves, about your boy Ellis, about Nathan Wilson. I've seen a few minutes from this year. They're dual-regged, obviously down at step 5 right now, doing very well in a very young side. Obviously, you probably don't know this, but our reserve team manager recently left to take a first-team job at step 4, Billy Cove. Congratulations to him. Good luck with him at Basildon. But there's obviously been a bit of disruption in the reserves for that. What's your view on the sort of youth prospects at the club? It's not the same as top-level academies. These guys aren't contracted to us either, so they can leave. As a result, it's hard when you're not giving them game time.
It's a big jump from our reserves to our first team.
Massive jump.
Huge jump. But what the reserves is almost, it offers that pathway for our youth section to come through. And we've got lots of our under 18s players are playing in the reserves this year. The reserves last year won the league, were really successful. We had a more difficult season this year because part of our what we do, rightly or wrongly, but part of my kind of the way I like to do things is, with our reserve team management, ready players for senior football. If they're not quite ready for us, well, it's not the best thing for that individual to continue playing in our reserves in the hope that the rare, occasion they get the opportunity to come and fill a gap in the first team. So we try and put them out at senior level football. You spoke about Nathan Wilson. Nathan Wilson is a player who, played for our reserves for 2 seasons. We sent him out to get men's football. He's done fantastically well. He's captain at that club.
Yep.
And we dual registered him when we had our, not to get in the way, not to, to the detriment of his club, but we used him in fixtures where they didn't have a game, and that's what we can do because they're in different league. And similar for Ellis, I put Ellis out to the same club because they've had quite a few of our young players who have done really well there, and they get really well looked after at White Ensign. Ayola Adebayo's one that's been actually one of our old players. Alvy Keefe is playing there now, there's and somewhere for go and play men's football, good competitive level, in the hope that, they then able to make the next step up. And if that next step is us, brilliant. If it's one below us, building towards that, then I still like to think that they consider themselves as our players.
Yeah.
I mean, Ellis doesn't get a lot of choice.
No.
he's our player if I decide, at the moment. But for Ellis,
often on an hour's notice.
Sometimes. And that's the other thing as well. I mean, to those 2 boys, they were due to play their fixture. We had an injury crisis, White Hawk away.
Yeah.
They got called off late, and because we were light on the bench because of the amount of injuries and illness we had, they drove down together to sit on the bench. They didn't even get on.
So, it's a long old journey as well. White Hawk.
It's one of our longest of the season.
Those boys. If Nathan or Ellis ever become regulars at this football club, which I hope they do, it will be well earned. Do you know what I mean? They've really put the time in. They've invested in this team, and that's not always going to work out for every player. The nature of the beast is that, but we don't. Ellis, we talk about him as one of our own. It's the closest thing we've got, right? Because he's basically been on the journey from day one.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful thing when it can work out, and I really hope it does. But the commitment from those boys is insane.
But Nathan's done his kind of a good stint at that level, and he's really shown and he's shown the benefit of going and playing men's football. As others, there are other examples out there.
And fair to say, I think in the minutes he's had this year, he's done himself very proud. Took a penalty as well, volunteered to take a penalty against Brighton Sea. Big balls on that, scored it obviously.
The only reason he's not with us is because it would be unfair of me if I'm not going to play him regularly and use him regularly. And he's best where he is at the moment, just playing.
But a good future ahead of him.
He's got a very good future. Yeah.
Agreed. So a couple of quick questions I want to rattle through, but there was a lot of questions about Josh Asude obviously coming back for his 3rd spell.
Yep.
Can you talk us through a little bit behind the decision there, and I mean, statistically, he's improved. Not only is he improved in his goal and assist rate, he's doing it at a higher level than when he played for us previously. So what do you put that down to?
I think he's got quicker.
He can't have got quicker. That's
No,
not possible.
Not quicker. Experience, playing time. It's one of those. Josh was young. He wasn't a baby but he was young in his football journey. In terms of his football age, was young with us. We had disruptive seasons, of COVID. So a lot goes on in people's personal lives as well, and Josh didn't necessarily have the easiest of time on and off the pitch during that COVID period. With all of our players, when they go on, so you always keep an eye out for them and see how they're doing. And he had a really good season last year. I mean, even when we were in the league, when he was at Coventry, he scared the life out of us. You always knew the threat of him when we went on that fantastic run, and we went to Coventry on a Tuesday night, and he scared the life out of us. And it's just really getting the timing right as to, has he developed in his end product, in his consistency. Been seeing lots, sent other people to go and see him, people that didn't necessarily know him to go and see him, people that know him well to go and see him, before making the decision to come back in for him. And I think he always felt that he wanted to come back, and unfinished business with us.
But I think he
probably
regrets
regrets how things happened in the past. I think I think he wouldn't mind me saying that. And certainly the last time when when he moved on again, but he's come back. He's more mature.
For sure.
He's a little. He's made big improvements in knowing how to use his pace. I think at times he was always too quick for his own good. It's very difficult to do things at the pace he does things and still be effective with it.
I think that maturity has come through off the pitch when you speak to him, but also on the pitch in the way he plays, right?
Yeah, and he's gone and he's done it. He's gone and had 40, 50 game seasons. Got regular football under his belt.
Scored a lot of goals.
That might have come with us.
It
might have come with us, but it didn't. But it felt the time was right to bring him back, and so far, he's proved it a good decision.
And I think it links to the overall message of this video, for me anyway, which is we try our best to create a good atmosphere at this club. Dev does a great job at it. And what it means is sometimes players move on for circumstantial reasons, but there's always a chance of them coming back because they generally have a really good experience at our club. I think Tom Anderson and Josh Asude are two very good examples of that. Both were very keen to come back. We were keen to have them back. Sometimes you have to make those decisions. There might be other players that have moved on, and we've talked about in this video or other videos, that may come back one day. It's entirely possible. We never close the door. We never burn bridges. The only way a player wouldn't want to come back to us, and let's create a hypothetical situation where a player doesn't have a great time at our club and doesn't work out, they go away and they really kick on, and we want them back one day. And Josh could be a great example of that, right? The only way that wouldn't happen, potentially, is if they didn't have a good experience at our club. Not because of the way they played, because of the way they felt welcomed. And there's definitely one player we talked about in this video who I'd be surprised if we ever wanted back, they'd want to come back. And I think that's completely avoidable. Even if it doesn't work out with a player, we don't have to let it go in that direction. So, again, as a fan, I encourage you guys to use your brains to think about the long-term security and ability of this club to compete. And let's not cut our nose off to spite our face. Let's criticise when criticism is due. Let's do it in a fair way, because it could come back to bite us in the short term and the long term. Right, couple of questions just to finish really quickly. People ask me about my name. Spencer CB, not Owen. I'm always confused by this. I've been following since the Zarate kid. First of all, shout out to Maro Zarate, who recently retired from football. Thank you for paying for the deposit on my house with Zarate kid videos.
You can still see them somewhere, can't you?
It's still available. And people do. People still watch them. It baffles me. People still watch my old FIFA videos. Spencer Owen. Owen's my middle name. I have told this many times before in videos. It's the name I always use on social media since I was a kid or when social media came about. It's my middle name. I used to do stand-up comedy. I didn't want to go on as Carmichael Brown because I felt it sounded posher than it is. We're not posh. If you know me in real life, you know that. But it sounds posh. So I didn't want to sound posh. Then what happened is my brothers ended up getting on social media as well, using their actual names, and it created this weird confusion where people thought we were like stepbrothers or something. We're not. I just stayed with the name that I'd always had on social media before they were on social media. And then what happened is last year we played Chatham Town in that Velocity Cup final, right? And it came to my attention that the Isthmian League thinks we're two different people, because the programme literally said something about the CEO of #United, Spencer Owen, and the chairman, Spencer Carmichael Brown, like they're two different people because there's two names out there. Because I always use my real name for official documents. So I said to the guys, let's cut the nonsense, get rid of the Owen, put my actual name on the graphics from now on. That's why you lot got confused. Apologies if it ruined any of your lives, but I'm sure it didn't. Let's crack on. And there's a lot of questions about the future here. I think I'd rather cover them in like end of season or start of season videos. But generally, like questions about where could we be in the future? What's the status of the stadium? Do we think we could go up without investment? The short answer to all those questions is we're always working on stuff. There's been opportunities that have come up this season. Some have gone away, some are still there, around grounds, around working with other clubs, around investment, in the women's game, in the men's game, non-stop stuff coming out our door or things that we're trying to put together. The short answer is I'll always do stuff that I think is in the best interest of this club. And some of that means not spending loads of money for the sake of it and putting ourselves in a less strong financial position because it achieves a short-term goal. As that relates to stadiums, obviously stadiums can be very expensive. So I'm always looking for sort of cleverer ways for us to get that ground we want. And then when it comes to promotion, so like a target for this year, not an expectation, but a target was to see if we can get in the playoffs. That's still mathematically possible. But that wasn't an expectation because of the money that's been spent in this division. So unless we do get significant investment and we do have a sort of stronger pocket of money to play with, we will most likely never spend the amount of money in this league that is required to really guarantee yourself a promotion race. That's not to say we won't one day. My aim would be to get in a position where we can do that. But as things stand now, the really simple way of categorizing it is our money comes from views. So every view we monetize on YouTube, every view we get a sponsor from, whether that's on a YouTube sponsorship or another social media platform, is invested back into the club. So, you know, what's interesting about this club is in nearly 9 years, very nearly 9 years now, we have gone through multiple levels. We've played hundreds and hundreds of games, and we've actually maintained a really strong viewership on matches, which still surprises me. Like, you guys are amazing. How your regular commitment to watch every game we play is so impressive, and I bloody love it. But the actual sort of economical reality of it is we've had, 3 promotions, and the views don't go up, but the costs do. And the reality of that is, I know some of you asked about the non-league pyramid. We're still in the 7th tier. If you understand non-league and you understand that we've gone from the 10th to the 7th, that's pretty exciting. If you don't, and you're speaking to someone, particularly from another country, where the 7th tier, like I could play in the 7th tier in most countries. I could play higher than the 7th tier in most countries. I couldn't play in the 7th tier in this country. I mean, I could, because I could just put myself in hashtag, but I wouldn't be very good, is the problem.
Need no manager.
Yeah, you could play too, though. You have played. What tier did you play? 5th?
Oh, what? I'm sorry. I thought you meant now.
No, you could play now though, if you wanted to. Like, if we're doing like a little charity game, me and you to play.
Charity game, yeah.
You played 5th tier, wasn't
Yes.
it? Yeah. So, like, the point I'm making is, until you get to, I don't even know what it would be. What is it, League 2? The league where suddenly everyone really takes interest and the views just double, triple. We're talking to an audience of hardcore fans. So we've got to be really careful about how big our eyes are. Do we want to get to the Premier League one day? I mean, I'd like to. It costs hundreds of millions of pounds to do that. I don't have that. Do you guys have it? Let me know in the comments below, because it would be useful. But no, so we've got to be careful not to grow too quick. And to finish, I think Dev's mentioned it a couple of times today, what we really need is to increase our attendances at games. Because even though our club doesn't rely on it financially, it does impact performance. It does impact vibe. It impacts the experience our players get. It impacts everything. So if you are local or you've thought about coming to a game, as we often have people come to their first hashtag game from all over, do come down. Home games particularly is where we'd like to see, because we always get good attendances at away games. Parkside, Aveley, we encourage it because it will make a difference, especially in this season. If we've got a run in, if we've got something to play for, every person makes a difference. Come, be loud, and let's see what we can do. Devs, anything to finish from you, my friend?
No, unless you want to answer the question about your tuna and peanut butter bagels.
Did you see that?
Horrific. Criminal offence.
Have you tried it, though?
Why would I?
You can't knock it until you've tried it. That's a law.
I'm not... I didn't try it, but I did test it out on my dogs and they turned their nose up at it. So
your dogs have got issues, mate. Because tuna peanut butter bagels, it was actually the second one. Toasted sandwiches is what I would recommend as a starter pack. Peanut butter, you have to toast the bread. Peanut butter, a whole tin of tuna. Diagonally cut for this one. I don't mind a horizontal cut from time to time, but this is a diagonal jobby. Get involved. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed it.
LP's just thrown up in the bin.
Yeah, I mean, that's because he's out last night. No, thanks for watching, guys. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe for more. Up the tags. Devs, keep up the good work. Let's see where we end up in a couple months. And as I've said at the start of the video, TST and lots of other things to look forward to. So we appreciate your support. See you next time.